Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a dynamic perspective flex repeater component. Dynamic meaning you can add instances and remove them in the runtime. I know I haven't been posting videos, but there's a lot going on in my personal life right now. I moved. What else? I was working on other projects. I switched jobs. Working on a house plan, trying to start building a house here in the next few months or so. So there's a lot going on, but I still try to be involved in the Discord community. I'm glad you guys are still watching the videos I put out. That means a lot to me. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this video with the dynamic flex repeater. I was poking around in the forum a few days ago and I saw somebody ask a question about how to get this done. So I thought I'd make a quick video. I'm starting out with a brand new project in my designer here. Let's probably create a new folder and call it dynamic flex repeater or something like that. You can call it whatever you want. I just want some organization because I might reuse this project for other things. Okay, and then I'm going to create a flex container view called main. Let's create this view. In this view, we'll just have a label here. I'm not sure. We'll just call it dynamic flex repeater or something. We can change this later. Depends on what we do. Okay, so now we will add our flex repeater component. I want it to be a column, so I want the instances to repeat up and down instead of left to right. And then this view here, this component will make it grow and fill the rest of the space. And then on the root container, we can add some more styling, add 10 pixels of padding. Yeah, okay, that works for now. Okay, now let's make our other view that we're gonna repeat over. So let's just create another view inside the dynamic flex repeater folder. We'll call this instance or something. Value label instance, something like this. We'll also make this a flex container. And let's go ahead and create this. Inside this view, I want to have a few things. I want to have a few labels. So let's go ahead and add those labels. Label. Actually, I want this container to be a row. So I'm going to have a few labels here. Let me add another label and let me add a button. So you can also, so let me add a button secondary. You can also use an icon. You'll see what I'm going to use it for and you're going to say, why didn't you just use an icon? And I can explain myself a little bit, possibly. So here, this label will display whatever we pass in. This middle value here will make it grow and fill the rest of the space. And then this button here, let's remove some of the default styling. Box shadow, set that to none. Let's remove the outline 0. Let's remove the border 0. Let's remove the text. What we want in this button is just an icon. Maybe close. Yeah. There we go. Something like this. You might be wondering why I used a button instead of an icon. It's a good question. So let me just drag on an icon. If I drag it on to my root container here, and if we take a look at the event types, configure events, you notice that I have mouse events here, on click, pointer events, keyboard events. But if you look on the button, we have an extra category here, on action performed. And I found that using this on action performed event is just more consistent. For instance, you might not have a mouse if you're building this application for a touch device, you don't have a mouse, and then the on click mouse event is just unpredictable. I found in my own experience. Might be different for you. I like using this on action performed because it captures mouse clicks, it captures drags and touch screen clicks as well, pretty better than just an on click mouse event. So that's why I use it. Okay, so we have this button here, we have a few labels, so let's add some styling here on this label. Again, this is besides the point of the video, but we'll just add some font weight just to make it look a little bit nicer. Bold. Let's add margin. Let's add 5 pixels margin right, just to space them a little bit. What I see people doing is using spacer labels, and I don't understand why you would do that. I don't know, I might be missing something, but even in some Exchange resources, I see people adding labels and just using them as spacers, which I don't get, but maybe I'm missing something, like I said. Okay, so on my view, on the value label instance, I'm gonna go ahead and save. On this view, I'm gonna add a few parameters. I'm gonna add a parameter called label, which will be here, and then I'll add a parameter called value. And then I'll add a parameter called index. So this is a special parameter that gets passed in when you make this subview here an instance in a flex repeater component. The index parameter gets passed in by itself by default. You'll see here, I'll show you here in a second. Okay, and then let's bind. The last thing we're going to do is bind this value here to our param. So we'll bind this to label. We'll bind this to value here, and we'll use the index parameter here in a little bit. Let me just show you what happens. So label, when I change this label, for example, temp, we have it change here. And then when I change this value to 46, it changes here. Let's actually add some more styling here. So let me remove this binding, create an expression binding, use the same label, but then we'll just append a colon, just like that. Okay, now let's go back to our main view, and we're going to repeat this. We're going to repeat the little view we just created now. So let's specify it in the path, value label instance, whatever you called it, and then let's add an instance here. Let's actually go back for a second, and let's add some margin on the root. Click the root container here. Let me add some margin. You could add padding, but you'll see why I'm adding margin. So let's add margin 10. Let's do 5 pixels top and bottom, 10 pixels left and right. And then let's add a border. Let me add a border very quickly. I'm using a variable here, 40. Maybe make it a little bit nicer. Border radius 4 pixels, something like this. Okay, so when I use margin, you'll see my border show up here. When you use padding, I think just play around with it here. Let me change this to padding. There you go. You'll see that it adds padding inside the container, but then the border is on the very outside. So if we go back to our main container here, let me uncheck use default width so it fills all of the space. This is what it's going to look like here. It doesn't look super bad. Let me add another instance like this. But when we use margin here, I know I'm getting kind of carried away. And then we go back to the main view, you'll see it adds spacing between them. And then we can also add, so inside we can also add here, let's also add some padding. 0, let's do 10 pixels, just like this. And then we can go back, there we go. So here's my dynamic flex repeater view. This is what I have so far. This button, that does nothing. Also, another thing that the button does that the icon does not do for you is it sets the cursor to pointer by default, which is nice as well. So there's another added benefit of using the button with an icon versus the icon component. Okay, let me save again so I don't lose my work. Okay, now the default, or now the dynamic part. Let's add a button here. So on my, or we can probably add it. Yeah, let me add a button here on the very bottom. Button. Oh. Okay, let me add a secondary button. There we go, like this. And we can call this button here, add instance. Instance, something like this. And then when we click this button, I want it to add an instance of my view here that I had specified. Okay, so that's easy enough to do. Let's go to this buttons on action performed event and add a script action. You might notice this is 8.1.18. This is what it looks like. It's pretty nice. It has your different components. If you type in self, it'll tell you all the properties and whatever else relates to whatever object you're currently typing, which is nice. It's like IntelliSense kind of. What we want to do here, let's define something like instance, and then remember our two parameters were label, and we can call this temp, or temp temperature, and then we also have a value. So for the value, I'm going to add a random number between, so let me quickly look up how to generate a random integer. Python to generate random integer. Okay, let me show you what I'm looking at here. Okay, so something like this. And then we'll use a random integer here between 1 and 120 or something. Sure. Let's see if that works. And then we're going to append our instance to the flex repeater instances. So we'll browse here, go to instances, and just do .append. Or actually, well, let's try doing it this way. There might be a quirk doing it this way. So it might be better actually to first browse for instances, and then we're going to do instances dot let's call it new instances is equal to instances dot append. This might not be necessary, and then we're going to write back to instances. So this goes back to another forum post I saw posted by Phil. It's like the grandfather of the forum. Okay, we're going to write back new instances. Okay, so let's see if this does what we want it to. When we hit this button, it'll add an instance. No, it will not. Let's see what happened here. Console. Okay. None type object has no attribute append. Okay, let's see instances. Let's change to array, and now let's add an instance. Okay, so something is going wrong on our script. Let's troubleshoot this. Obviously didn't plan this to happen. Okay, so let's actually try this here. Let me try this. Let me just try writing back. Let me just go like this. This is dot append. So the instances is a list, and then I'm going to append this object here. instance. Instance here is an object, and then this is a list, and the list should have an append function. Okay, let's just double check and make sure. Let's change this to an array. Okay, let's run this again. Okay, and now you can see we're adding instances dynamically. Okay, you may be wondering, how do I hook up here? So when I delete one of these instances, it actually deletes it and removes it. There's a few components that we'll have to do. The first one is, let's go back to our label instance here. The first one is we're going to have to create an action on this button, or configure an event and then add an action. So let's do that. Let's add an on action performed event and then add a script action. On this script action, what we're going to do is we're going to send a message. We're going to use the message handling feature in Perspective. So we're going to, let's just think of a message name here, delete instance, something like this. And then we didn't actually create this message yet. Keep that in mind. And then we're going to system.perspective.send message. And then we're going to pass in our message name. Our payload is going to, let's define a payload object. Inside this payload, we're just going to have one key value pair, and it'll be our index, and our index will come from our param index. You'll see that this will work. There's actually documentation. Let me find that really quick. Forum.inductive. Okay. Let me find the documentation. Actually, let me look up docs.inductiveautomation.com, and then we'll look up flex repeater. I just want to show you that I'm not just making up the index, that it actually does here. So the object will usually contain one or more parameters, including the instance's own index that will be passed into that particular instance. So I was trying to do this manually, and it was a real pain, but then I found out that it does it for you automatically, which is really nice. Okay, so we're going to use that instance that we're passing into as a view param here, index. And then we're going to send this message. This message will be received by the flex repeater, which will then remove the instance at whatever index we specify here. Okay, so let's save this. Let me actually copy this, because I'm going to create a message right now. Let me go back to my main view, and then on my flex repeater, I'm going to, oops, wrong one. I'm going to gosh darn it, configure scripts, add a message handler, and then inside this, I'll add the message type to delete instance so that it matches the script we just wrote. I'll set it to listen scope page because it's a different view. And then here, I want to call my payload. So actually my index will be payload, and then the key will be index, if you remember from literally 5 seconds ago. And then what we're going to do is, let's actually wrap this in a try except. We're going to delete. What are we going to delete? We're going to delete the instance at a particular index. So let's go props instances at whatever index we specify here. And then for the accept, we can just system.perspective print, add a message here. You should log or do something better, but let's just print for now. Unable to delete instance index plus something like this. Okay, now let's try out our system. So when I hit, let me put it into play mode. Okay, let's see what's going on here as well. Local variable payload reference before assignment. Okay, so on message received. Let me go back here. Configure scripts, delete instance. Index is payload index. So here that matches matches here. Okay, so let me go back to this area. Oh, I forgot to pass in my payload. Duh. So I passed in my message type and my payload. Now let's go back to my main view. Let's try this again. So now when I delete and watch these temperatures, this is why it's important that it's a different number. Because when I delete something in the middle, so this is index 0, 1, 2, when I delete something in the middle, it deletes the right one. So let me add a few more instances, and when I delete 73, 105, and 110 are going to move up, just like that. So it's doing what we want it to do. Okay. That's pretty cool. And I think that might be useful in your projects. I know I found it useful. Okay, that's all I had for you guys for today. I hope to keep posting stuff. I'm not giving up on this channel. I just, like I said, I was really on a time crunch. But thank you for watching. If you have questions, let me know in the comments below or on Discord, or send me an email. I'll try to help in any way that I can, even though sometimes I don't have enough time to help as much as I would like to. That's all I have for you guys today. Let me know if you found this useful, and let me know any comments you have in the comments below. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.